Welcome back. Westchester County Exec Rob Astorino seems to be making a strong recovery following his gubernatorial election loss to Andrew Cuomo. And I sat down with him yesterday discussing, among other things, his bid for the governor's job, his political future, and the lack of party support from people like Governor Christie. I asked Astorino about comments that Christie made over the summer about keeping his hands out of the race here. First, we're going to hear Christie's comments, and then you'll hear Mr. Astorino's reaction from yesterday.
We don't pay for landslides, and we don't invest in lost causes. If the New York race becomes competitive, I'll consider campaigning in the New York race. But right now, by the public polls, there's a lot more competitive races like this one in Connecticut where I got to spend my time.
Not helpful. Not helpful at all. And I told him so. It wasn't necessary. I wish he didn't do it. I wish he took it back. But obviously, we move on.
You know, Tom, to that point, that issue, apparently, and it was widely reported, Skelos had a deal out in the island with the governor that there was basically a quid pro quo. I'll stay out of your nest, you stay out of mine here. It seemed from the national level, I mean, Christie's job was heading up the RGA to try and get Republicans elected governor. And then you get members that are running in, you know, for state senate right now, and there was this backroom deal with the governor right now. Does Astorino have a point that Republicans didn't get around?
No, he doesn't, and I'll tell you why. Is that if you're Chris Christie, your job is to elect Republican governors, okay? That means you got to pick the races because you only have a limited amount of money. You got to pick the races. Now, where Christie made a really bad mistake, I thought, was the language he used.
Lost cause.
Well, but again, remember this, is that if you look back over time.
And that was only July, by the way.
No, but remember, that is a line that he has frequently used throughout public service. It's a lost cause, and he shouldn't have used it in this case. Could you imagine if he had told Rick Scott in Florida, I'm going to pump $3 million into a race in New York, and you're going to lose by a couple of thousand votes. He only won by a few thousand. Who would they be screaming for right now? Christie's head. So I think the verbiage is what hurt him the most. You can't be giving RGA money to a candidate down 25 points.
I hear you.
But you should absolutely.
I mean, just the impact on donors. The governor's telling me it's a lost cause. Why am I writing this guy a check?
But again, is that we always think that because Chris Christie said that, I mean, all you do is look at the polls to say this is a very uphill battle. Now, let me go back to 1994. Scott Vanderhoff knows it very well.
He kept reminding everybody on the trail about that race in 94.
But let me remind people of 1994. 1994, Ralph Marino was a Senate Majority Leader, Republican, working behind the scenes for then Governor Cuomo. We had a very popular Republican mayor in New York City come out against George Pataki. What did we do? We won. You never heard George Pataki whine about it. You go out and you win the race. Rob, as I said on this show a long time ago, should never have run this race. He's done a phenomenal job running Westchester County. You don't go into a race with people telling you they're going to give you money until you have the money, knowing the other guy's already got $30 million.
Do you think at the end, Scott, and I talked with Dominic last night, he crossed the 40% number, right? And for a lot of reasons, I think more of a vote against maybe this current governor than for Mr. Astorino. The margin was 13, 14 points when it was all said and done. Can he claim any moral victory out of that helps him in 4 years or no?
Well, I think so. For a Republican to do pretty well upstate, he won, he practically won there. The problem is no one came to vote. And that's really a statement about Cuomo. It's not a statement about anybody else. But Tom and I were talking about it before. I mean, you had to do so much more to get New York City involved and what have you. But he can certainly claim that he brought the issues to the forefront. I mean, to that, the money he had, he did it. But it's still a tough, and I just think Christie completely blew it. I mean, he likes to be upfront and refreshingly honest about things. This was not the time to do it. Not in July.
And by the way, to be fair, Tom, you had Rick Perry, you had Walker, you had
Jeb Bush.
I mean, Jeb Bush. People showed their face in New York for Astorino. He could have done a flyby, right? I mean, it would have killed him.
Again, I think he handled the moment wrong, but the idea that he should have pumped money into the race is where I get lost on the whole thing. You know, and you can't, what you have to look at is that the argument needs to be made and stressed. A Republican candidate cannot get 18% of the vote in New York City. You need to do better, which means your message needs to be better. Again, Pataki in '94 got 59% of the upstate vote. 59. On that day, people were screaming about the turnout that night in upstate New York. You need to have the right message.
But that race was a bit different, though. I mean,
Why was it different?
It's different because everybody was sick of Mario Cuomo. And
my-
Pataki was the perfect candidate at the right time.
You made my point, is that if you're going to run that race when the other guy has $30 million and he's not, quote unquote, an unpopular governor, sit back and wait.
I want to get a couple quick things here. Scott, we got Skelos mentioned this today, the Republican conference leader, that the IDC, as expected, is going to caucus with the Republicans. This has nothing, my objection to this, Republican or Democrat. I'd say the same thing if they were going to, they campaigned as Republicans, promised they'd caucus Republicans, and the election goes the other way, then all of a sudden they want to be Democrats. I'm not naive to how the world works, but isn't it more than a little distasteful if you're voting in their district? They tell you they're going to run as one thing, and they're going to caucus as one thing. All of a sudden, the election goes the other way. Oh, forget it. I'm going to go the other way. I know they can wait in a few years and vote again, but how about a semblance of just a bit of a spine? I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test.
It borders on deceitful.
Yeah.
It really to the voters, and I think you have a lot of Democrats who are saying just that this is not right. You said when you ran that you were going to do this. We pulled back some of the primaries on a couple of you guys. We didn't. The unions shifted, so they really did make somewhat of a promise. What's interesting about this is, the Republicans have that one or two, but you got, is it Felder? Who can go? Simca can go either way. Yeah. You got guys, Mavericks in the Senate who on certain issues can go. So he actually needs Jeff Klein in certain respects. The real issue will be interesting to see is whether he has any room at the table for budget discussions, leadership discussions. I don't see how they allow him.
This is the best thing for both parties.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I know the governor wanted this.
Yes, but more importantly, though, is as you know, is that the conversation, the deal making that took place, so many of those handshakes on the other side of it, from the working family standpoint, et cetera, were thrown out the window.
But
the
Tom,
assurances
my
that Jeff
point is, I don't disagree with anything you said necessarily. However, then run as an independent.
Okay,
then don't tell me you're going to be one thing as soon as the election ends. You asked me for my vote. Now all of a sudden, I'm going to go the other way.
Here's what nobody does. Nobody goes into the booth and says, I'm voting for the conference. I'm voting for that group. They go in, they vote for Jeff Klein, they vote for Dean Skelos as individuals. That's all the guy who goes in.
I think you're overestimating
I'm not
the involvement of the electorate. I think people look down lines. I think not everybody, but some vote on party lines. Now,
they all vote on party lines.
You know the woman, so this for many people is a name and a picture, but you can put a relationship to this as well. Rachel Nordlinger, the aide to First Lady Charlene McCray, she's taken a leave of absence to deal with, among other things, her son. Her 17-year-old son, Kari, was arrested trespassing charges over the weekend. Latest in a string of bad press for her. She's faced scrutiny over a live-in boyfriend who's also a convicted murderer, convicted felon, I should say. Nordlinger released a statement saying, I can handle criticism and scrutiny of me even when it's mean-spirited, but increasingly, she went on, my son has been subjected to attacks that have nothing to do with the public interest and everything to do with derailing this administration. And to a degree, the mayor echoed some of those same sentiments, thought it was cheap shots by the media. They had to know that this was part of the deal. Do you really think it's cheap shots? Or in many ways, was this invited and this allowed to drag on for too long until it got to this point?
Full disclosure, Rachel Nordlinger is a friend of about 30 years. So I'm not the one that's going to attack her because I don't abandon my friends. She's a single mother doing a tough job raising a son, an African-American son, and it's not easy. And, perhaps...
What does African-American son have to do with this story?
It has a lot to do with it because African-American
If you're a single white mom, that's
a good point. If you're a single white mom, you're a single Latino mom, you're a single Asian mom. It's the same thing. You're having a hard time.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so I stand corrected. Right. She's a single mom raising a child, and it's not easy. No. It's not easy. The child clearly She's a friend. I'm not going to say anything negative about her.
We know.
But she didn't do. But she, she didn't do anything. Nobody questioned her job. The job that she was hired to do.
Yeah, yes, they did. From day one.
No, but what I'm saying is that
lurking beneath the headlines, that's Sharpton's girl, and how dare they pay her $170,000 a year?
What I'm saying is that that's a separate issue, because everybody who has seen her from a distance or who knows of her says she's a quality worker, she works hard, et cetera, et cetera. This is clearly, it's almost like the Bloomberg Kathy Black situation. What Rachel, it seems to me, did is she mishandled paperwork. And clearly, if you're going to lay some blame there, she mishandled some paperwork. And they allowed this, the administration, de Blasio, in trying to be loyal.
Do you really think it was that, Tom? I mean, you saw the festering situation that happened, especially post Staten Island. The whole campaign that de Blasio ran and arguably won on was that he was going to be the guy to upturn stop and frisk.
Yeah.
Then Staten Island happens, and sitting on the dais, you got the police commissioner, the mayor, and right over his shoulder, you got Al Sharpton. He had to know the press was going to connect the dots and say, wait a second, Nordlinger was Sharpton's person. Now all of a sudden he's in the administration.
But that's not her fault. But
I'm
again,
not blaming her for it.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is that that's not her fault. Is that the point is that I believe that it became and started, the press really went after it for the reasons you stated. They didn't like the fact that Al Sharpton was sitting at the table. They didn't like the fact that the mayor's wife was everywhere and anywhere and nobody elected her, et cetera. So Rachel, because she messed up on the paperwork, and she has to take, the blame for that, is that I would be more upset sitting here as a citizen if I thought the First Lady had hired some incompetent woman who never showed up for a job, et cetera, et cetera.
Tell the truth. If you were counseling, you obviously did this job when you were governor, working with the governor. If you were counseling, would you have cut bait on this a while ago?
Of course I would have, but again,
this took too long with the boyfriend and all
no
the rest.
question about it. But the county executive would tell you the same thing: is sometimes loyalty gives you a blind eye, just like with Kathy Black. Kathy Black, you could have said.
But I'm just curious, for curiosity's sake here. If it was D'Amato's nephew under Pataki, do you think Pataki would have cut him loose 1, 2, 3, just like that?
No, I'm saying is that I just turned to the county executive and said I think those in that situation. Loyalty matters in this business.
Right. Okay.
And so if you don't have loyalty,
because if he cut a loose, Richard,
you don't.
he would have had to answer to Sharpton.
But again,
it's that simple.
Just think of what an indictment you just said is.
Okay,
that
but,
he's got to. He's
no,
worried. He's got to answer to Sharpton.
How did he get elected? I mean, those are his guys, Richard.
He would not be the mayor
think of it. If Andrew had come in here and he messed up on a story or whatever the case is, and it turned into something, you're going to stand with your guy. You're going to fight tooth and nails. Maybe sometimes you go to bed and I say, "Oh, what the hell is going on there?"
What if
but you got he'd stand with you too. You got to have loyalty in this business, and at the end of the day, you take the hit and you go forward.
I think sometimes delaying the first hit makes it worse.
Hindsight's
we've seen a
20/20.
whole lot of coldly dispassionate politicians. Maybe they're not at the table here tonight, but people would have pulled the plug on this thing a long time ago. You knew how it was going to end.
I feel bad for her. I really feel bad for her.
Okay, we come back here. We're going to head out to Missouri. Ferguson bracing for a grand jury's decision surrounding whether criminal charges ought to be brought against the police officer accused of killing 18-year-old Michael Brown. Is declaring a state of emergency and calling in the National Guard the best way to go? We'll ask the table.